And welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to another edition of Ringside. I'm Jeff Cruaire. Jam-packed program tonight. We're going to be delving into the David Vitter investigation and where David Vitter goes from here. Got some people involved in this case from the very beginning. Chris Tidmore and Vincent Bruno, who were involved years ago in getting this story out. They're going to be joining us. Also, we're going to be joined by the attorney for the Canal Street Madam, Vinnie Mosca, also a local elected official, but a well-known defense attorney. He's going to give us an update on this case from her perspective. So a lot we're going to be getting into. But let's start off with some of our top news stories of the week. And, of course, number one, David Vitter addressed the media and went back to work. He had been in hiding for a week, I guess dealing with all of this media attention, dealing with the shock of the charges coming out, dealing with really this double life of his being exposed, then asking for forgiveness from his wife and his church, and then the voters. The question now is going to be, what more is out there? How will the voters respond if anything else comes out? And if not, can he get back to being an effective U.S. Senator? The jury's still out on all of that. Also this week, Eddie Jordan went before the city council, and one city council member, Shelley Madura, had the courage to call for his resignation. None of the others joined in. And in fact, protesters there said that Eddie Jordan needed to stay in office basically because he's African American. And in my view, race shouldn't be a factor. Competence should be a factor. Is he doing a good job? If so, he stays. If not, he needs to either be recalled, resign, or be impeached. The final threat that voters have is to just turn him out of office next year when he comes up for re-election. And Mayor Ray Nagin continues to play politics instead of doing his job up in Washington. Last week it was Philadelphia. The week before that it was New York. It was Kansas City. He's gallivanting around the world while there's a crisis going on in his city. Crime continues to go up. Recovery has not occurred the way all of us want it. And Mayor Nagin is all over playing politics, meeting with Howard Dean, meeting with Maxine Waters. Again, we've got problems at City Hall, and Mayor Nagin's not doing anything to address the problems we have here in the city. Okay, folks, when we come back, we'll be joined by investigative journalist Chris Tidmore and Republican State Central Committee member Vincent Bruno as we look at this David Vitter scandal. That's next.
Tiger Care, the newest in health information from the doctors of the LSU Healthcare Network. Tuesday nights at 8 here on WLAE TV.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. And of course, the big story of the week is still the David Vitter investigation. The scandal continues. As you know, a lot of pieces to this puzzle aren't in place yet, but two people that know a lot about this story are with us here in the ring. Very pleased to have, first up, Chris Tidmore, journalist and now a candidate for state representative. Chris, welcome.
Thank you.
And Vincent Bruno, member of the Republican State Central Committee, member of the Parish Executive Committee in Jefferson, and someone very intimately involved in the case as well. Welcome, Vincent.
Pleased to be here.
Vincent, let me start with you.
Sure.
When this whole, I guess, allegation of David Vitter being involved with prostitutes started back in 1999, correct? While David Vitter and Dave Treen were locked in a very competitive contest for Congress, and you were one of the key staffers for Dave Treen, correct?
Well, I was not a staff, I was a volunteer. I've been knowing Governor Treen for years, and I want to tell you, he's a fine man. And as we know now, I think the people of the 1st Congressional District made a horrible mistake in not voting him in.
All right. Now, what happened? You were at the headquarters and you were approached by...
Oh, we had this white female came into the headquarters and said she was having an affair with, at that time, State Representative David Vitter. And it was going on for some time. And we checked her out. And the more we checked, the more it her story had validity.
Now, why didn't this become an issue during the race for Congress in 1999? Was it because Dave Treen told you not to make it an issue?
Dave didn't want to use it in the campaign, and of course I disagreed with him because David Vitter was presenting himself to the public as one person, and he's an entirely different person. And I think people should have a right to know who they're voting for, warts and all.
Now, it really didn't become public until a few years later. You went on some radio programs, including mine, made these charges. And what motivated you to finally come public with this?
No, I did not go on radio shows to make it public. When Dave said he didn't want to use it, we let it die. And I was on a statewide show with Jim Inkster, and we were debating. The governor had asked me to go on, at that time Governor Foster, to debate Sally Campbell, who was at that time executive director to the Christian Coalition, of which, by the way, I'm the first district director. But we were talking about a bill that was before the legislature. And towards the last 3 or 4 minutes of the show, they were taking calls, and a Ned from Metairie called in and said, "Mr. Bruno, you're a hitman for Dave Treen." I said, "Okay, I'm a hitman for Dave Treen. What's your question?" "No, you are." I said, "Okay, I told you I am. What's your question?" He said, "Well, you've been going on radio shows and saying that David Vitter had an extramarital affair." I said, "No, I have not." He says, "Yes, you have. You're lying." I said, "Look, what's your question?" He said, "No, you're a liar." I said, "Okay. You called me a liar twice. Now, what's your question?" He says, "Well, you're a liar." I said, "Okay, 3 times. That's it. 3 strikes. You accused me of doing it. I didn't do it. Now I am going to do it." Yes, I have credible information that David Vitter has had an extramarital affair. And, of course, time for commercial break and what have you.
That's when it all started.
That's when it started. He shot himself in the foot.
Then I later had you on, made those charges.
The next day, David Vitter was on your show.
Right.
Well, I think it was probably a Wednesday.
Right.
You invited me on Thursday. And we discussed it, and I had called my attorney. Vitter had called me a liar and a thug.
Right.
I said, "Okay, we're going to give him an opportunity now. I'm going to sue him." I talked to my attorney. We're going to sue him for defamation for $10 or whatever. But it gives you the opportunity to take depositions.
Right.
And if you remember, I said on your show, when we get David Vitter on the stand and he raises his right hand and says it didn't happen, even I, who is one of his most ardent adversaries, will say, "I'm sorry, and I will support you for anything you want to run for, David."
So he sent the letter of apology, you dropped it.
He hand-delivered a letter of apology.
To me and you. And then basically it didn't come up again until
and then he did "I'm sorry" and a mea culpas and what have you.
Now let's bring in Chris Tidmore here. And Chris, you jumped into investigative mode right after these charges were made.
Well, what happened was, after the initial charges, Vincent came to me and said, "Look, this case has been going through my mind. I want you to look into it," he says, and see where it stands. So I said, "All right." He gave me the original notes from the interviews. He had 3 sets of interviews with the lady alleged to be Wendy Cortez. He gave me those notes and gave me access to he and John Treen, who spoke to her, and also 2 other Republicans, independent of the Treen campaign. They were neutral in the Treen-Vitter contest, and they talked about it. And it basically led to investigating this woman, this elusive Wendy Cortez, an 11-month affair that she allegedly had with David Vitter at a small apartment on the corner of Dumaine and Dauphine Street. 2 years later, I would actually talk to her on the phone.
Okay. Now, when you talked to her, did you find her to be credible?
I found her to be credible. Part of it had to do with the fact she wanted absolutely no money. Throughout this entire process, she'd actually, I didn't offer her money, but other people had to come forward and tell her story. She wanted no resources, no money.
Okay.
All she wanted to do was tell her side of the tale.
But she didn't really come forward in a way where she could be interviewed on radio or television, or give her full name.
Well, because we had her full identity. We were able to check out, that she was a legitimate person. So we knew the person that she was talking to. That's how I knew when she was on the phone she was who she said she was. But she at the time did not want to, remember, she wanted nothing out of this. Being a call girl, she probably didn't want a whole lot of press exposure at the time. Richard Angelico was willing to put her on TV, and Richie has often told me this story. She didn't want to give her Social Security number at the time publicly, and so he didn't.
Vincent, you found her credible as well?
Well, everything she said checked out.
Okay. So then this story was big news a few years ago, really died down. David Vitter kept winning elections, and it was sort of forgotten about, really.
But one thing happened in that period. In 2004, right after I interviewed her, and I also interviewed, one thing that's been going through this whole case is she was attached to the Canal Street Madam. I didn't find any evidence in my investigations. What I saw was that she worked for a French Quarter escort service.
Okay.
And I had talked to her, Madame Nicole. David Vitter in this process said that these were politically motivated charges setting out to destroy him, and anybody who reported on him did. And that was kind of an interesting little take in my career, who was neutral in this whole process.
So, as this now, fast forward to the president, he's linked to the D.C. Madam. Vincent, did you feel vindicated after that? Did you feel like now that it became public news that the people could see some sort of connection to the charges you had made?
Well, I don't know if... you know what I felt? I felt like that probably did vindicate me. Let's say that. Okay, put that aside. How I felt at the time? I said, this guy better do something quick before all this information comes out, and it's going to hurt his family and his wife and his children. And when I asked for him to resign, that's what I'm thinking. This guy better get out quick and stop it dead, and go through a period of restoration and then come back like Bob Livingston. He did the honorable thing. He resigned. Bob Livingston, in my opinion, could come back and run for governor or whatever and win.
Chris Tidmore, Vincent Bruno has called for his resignation. Do you agree? Should he resign?
I think at this point, yes. There was a point. What has happened with David Vitter, honestly, is, and I understand why some Republicans are hesitant to this, because you have a Democratic governor, that means a Democrat would be appointed. But one of the things that's going on with David Vitter is this wasn't a one-time indiscretion. Most people could forgive that. This, and I can guarantee, having interviewed Wendy Cortez, been backed up by the Times-Picayune and their allegations now, is that this is a pattern of behavior we've seen over the years, over and over. And at the time that David Vitter denied, used very colorful metaphors, if you will, to me privately to deny that this had happened, he was actually seeing the D.C. Madam. So that I think that goes over the limits, and it's tarnishing Louisiana's reputation nationally.
Basically, he said that the New Orleans stories are not true. We have about 2 minutes left, so we want to wrap this up. He said the New Orleans stories are not true. Without any more concrete evidence linking him to any of these New Orleans prostitutes, the story ends, doesn't it, Chris?
Unless something more comes out. And I think time will tell on this to see what happens. I want to tell you that the Times-Picayune only reported a very small percentage of the information they had. And politically, I couldn't understand Mr. Vitter's justification to say, I'm sorry for the Washington, but nothing happened in New Orleans, because effectively, Jeff, he threw the gauntlet down to the press. And if there is anything else out there, it's coming out.
Will something else come out, Vincent Bruno?
I believe it probably will, but it won't be from me.
Okay. You've retired from the Vitter investigation, huh?
I said everything I had to say, and I think he's right now he's hurting the party. He needs to resign. He really does.
Now, Chris, you're involved in all this attention nationwide because of your role here, and you're at the same time running for state representative. How is that working out?
It has been, on the one hand, having been on Nightline, I'm probably the best-known state representative candidate in the country. How well that works as a Republican running in a Republican district, I don't know. I think most people, though, understand the role that I try to do in this. I have no personal axe to grind with David Vitter. I don't have anything against him. I'm not out to destroy him. As you know, Jeff, you've known me for a long time. I was actually sympathetic to him at one point. The point I'm just saying is his continued presence is hurting Republicans all over Louisiana.
Is it hurting Louisiana in the Senate, you think, as far as our recovery?
He's ineffective now. He's ineffective. He's a laughingstock. We were just discussing something earlier that's on MySpace. I mean, he's a joke, and he's the brunt of jokes. Go to coffee shops and listen. He needs to be restored.
He and Bill Jefferson are the 1-2 punch of hypocrisy and immorality right now.
He's hoping the story dies down.
Yeah.
Neither of you think it's going to happen.
I don't think, I think more will come out, but we have no way of knowing for sure. We just know what we've reported.
Well, but even if it dies down, his effectiveness is gone.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, we'll follow this very closely. Vincent Bruno, thanks for joining us. Chris Tidmore, thanks for joining us. We're going to follow this case and see where it goes, folks. And when we come back, we're going to be joined by the attorney for the Canal Street Madam, Vinny Mosca. We'll be right here in the ring next on Ringside.
La vida te está llamando. ¿Hasta dónde irás? Peace Corps.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. And we heard a little bit earlier from two people very involved in this ongoing case involving the senator and the Canal Street Madam. Now a real expert, someone very intimately involved. He's a well-known defense attorney, also a leader out in the city of Harahan, a council member. He represents the Canal Street Madam herself, Jeanette Mayer. Vinny Mosca is joining us here. And Vinny, welcome. How are you doing?
I'm doing fine. When you say intimate, I want you to know that I'm a believer in strong family values.
Very good, very good. And that is what I've always heard about you.
Thank you.
Vinny Mosca, let's talk a little bit about this case. We heard earlier in the program from Chris Tidmore and Vincent Bruno, who are, investigators and also someone that believes that there's a lot more to the story than the public knows. Your client said that Senator Vitter visited the brothel and was a customer, but in statements he made to the media, you said that he was not on any kind of list that you saw. So why, unless a lot of people, inquiring minds, want to know, why the discrepancy between what she said and what you've said?
Well, sure. After I saw her comments, I contacted her and I said, Jeanette, I have a different recollection, and do you mind if I broadcast my recollection, because I think it's the fair thing to do. And she said, no, you can do that. And my recollection was that during the course of the time I was involved in the case, and I was not Jeanette Mayer's first attorney. She had an attorney before she retained me, but she retained me really early on in the case. And during that time, I met with her several times, met with the government, had exposure, access to the list that she had at that time. Vitter's name was not on the list. Went through all the transcripts, tape recordings. His name was never mentioned, no code name for him. Looked at various surveillance memos from the Bureau and the Federal Bureau of Investigation and New Orleans Police Department. They were involved somewhat. And his name never surfaced. And it's just I never had any knowledge of him ever visiting the Canal Street brothel. Now, Jeanette did tell me that later, after I said what I said, that, Vinny, he was a customer of mine in the early 90s. I said, well, Jeanette, I wouldn't have any knowledge of that. And the only thing I can represent is what I knew at the time the investigation was going on. And then later on, Vincent Bruno tried to refresh my memory that we may have had a luncheon together, and basically the name David Vitter was brought up and in the context of this lady, Wendy Cortez. And, I listened, but I felt that he was lobbying Jeanette or trying to convince her to refresh her memory in a manner that, was consistent to what he believed.
But your recollection of that lunch, at that time, did she say that he was a customer, or was this sort of a new revelation when she reported this to the media recently?
To me, it was a new revelation.
Okay.
Yes.
So she's saying it was in the early 90s, which is a number of years ago.
Sure.
He wasn't on any kind of list that you saw.
No.
At one time, did she have a black book of customers that she burned? Is that
I've never seen a black book of any sort associated with the case. She has since told me that she had a black book that was burnt. If that was true, and I have no reason to doubt her, I've never seen it. Now, I know she had a black book in a recent interview, and I wouldn't believe that would be anything but just
a black book.
A black book, right.
Now, when you started working with her, did you tell her to make a list of the people that she remembered as her customers on like yellow tablets? Was that how she recorded the names for the federal government?
Her first attorney did that before I got involved in the case. In negotiations with the government, especially the federal government, you get the best result when you assist them in the investigation and prosecution of somebody else. So I did two things in connection with her case. I really challenged the government as to why the government didn't charge the men, whoever they were. And also, I convinced Jeanette to assist the government in the prosecution of anyone else. Now, in connection with that, I know during my representation of her, she did write down the list of names that she recalled being with or having exposure with or involved in her Canal Street brothel. Vitter's name was not on that list.
And that list is now in the custody of the U.S. Attorney? Or
Absolutely.
District Attorney? Okay.
FBI and the U.S. Attorney.
And they never did anything with it. Why? Why did Jeanette Mayer have to serve time in a halfway house? And I think her mother did and her daughter did. And not any of the customers of her
It was a decision that the federal government made. They interpret laws one way, and defense attorneys interpret them a different way. But I think the government felt that they had a history of not ever prosecuting the men in connection with prostitution cases. And I tried to convince the government that when you charge a conspiracy, you have to have more than one person involved in a conspiracy, and that would be the males as well as the women. But, you know, it was a decent result under the circumstances. She was looking at initially between 5 and 7 years in jail. So, and
she wound up getting 6 months in a halfway house?
Right.
That was a pretty good deal you got for her.
It was good.
Let's talk about her recent, I guess, comments. Many people are saying, Vinny, that she could have been just trying to get attention and get her name back in the media by sort of jumping into the D.C. Madam case.
Right.
Is that possible?
I think she's caught up with the media frenzy. I think there's a whole bunch of media attention, and it's still ongoing several days after his interview with the media. And I think, you know, being caught up in that, trying to recall things and trying to listen to other people's recollection of things, that's the stage that she's in. She certainly wants to promote a book which has not been fully written yet. She is involved in a contract with as a consultant for a film company in California, which we just recently negotiated for her mother and her daughter in connection with a series that will be aired on TV if the pilot is successful.
Wow! So that could be a big deal.
That occurred before the Vitter. All those negotiations occurred before the exposure of Vitter.
Has this exposure from the Vitter case helped her or hurt her, in your view?
It depends who you talk to. You know, if you talk to Jeanette, she's trying to help him.
Yeah.
I'm sure if you talk to those closest to David Vitter, they would disagree with that. But, you know, it depends who you talk to, and everyone's going to evaluate her credibility within their own value system.
From what you know of her, is she a truthful person?
I think she's a truthful person. I think in certain situations she may misspeak sometimes because she's trying to recall recollections. To kind of paraphrase or quote her, you know, if you've had experience with, say, many, many, many men, you got to try and recall just one incident.
Yeah, it's not easy.
No. And she'll be the first to admit that.
We've got about a minute and a half left, Vinny. The Times-Picayune ran a story about an individual named Wendy Cortez, linking her to David Vitter. To your knowledge, did she ever work with Jeanette Mayer in that Canal Street brothel?
I think Wendy Vitter was more of an independent...
Wendy Cortez.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
My mistake, yeah. But I say Wendy Cortez was an independent individual who, from what I understand, had connections with the French Quarter. Now, Jeanette believed she worked for her at some point in time, but I noticed in the newspaper that Jeanette said that wasn't Wendy's picture that was in the paper, and then later Jeanette indicated to me, no, it really was her picture, but she didn't want to, you know, say it was her because she wanted to protect her, but then she got a phone call from somebody who said, you know, that's not Wendy Vitter. I mean, Wendy Cortez, I'm sorry. But the bottom line is...
So there's confusion.
There's confusion everywhere.
And finally, last question to you. Do you think those names, all of those names of those customers that are in the custody of the U.S. Attorney, will ever be made public?
No, but I think through Jeanette's book there will surface a lot of different names.
Okay. Well, I'm sure you've been very busy with all this. And, you're earning your pay now.
Well, thank you.
Vinny Mosca, thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
Appreciate you updating us on this. Very, very interesting case. All right, next up, it's the final round. Time for my commentary of the week. That's next on Ringside.
What? All right. What's the joke? What's so funny?
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. Now it's time for my final round, my commentary of the week. On Monday, U.S. Senator David Vitter faced the media, but he didn't face the music. Vitter expressed his sorrow for his actions and apologized to his supporters, but he answered no questions. He said, "I'm not going to answer endless questions about it all over and over and over again." The comment was odd since he never answered any questions about his involvement with the D.C. Madam in the first place. The media left the news conference outraged that the staged event provided such little information to the public. I would have preferred to see Senator Vitter answer questions from the media about all of his actions. He should be truthful, completely forthcoming about what he did, when he did it, why his constituents still need to know the truth and deserve his full explanation is obvious. They need to know what happened. David Vitter is a public servant who supposedly answers to his employers, the voters of Louisiana. Now, at the news conference, David Vitter denied, quote, those New Orleans stories without being specific. He blamed, quote, political enemies, end quote, without naming them. Senator Vitter, inquiring minds want to know the answers to these unresolved questions. One question that was answered was whether David Vitter had the political skill to confront the media and deal with the embarrassment of these sordid revelations. The answer to that question is a resounding yes, as Vitter's performance was positively Clinton-esque. It was reminiscent of how Clinton survived the Jennifer Flowers scandal, basically by being vague, showing remorse, and allowing his wife to carry him through the tough spot. Now, in the Bill Clinton sex scandals of the 1990s, the allegations of illicit behavior never caused the president much trouble. Only when the DNA evidence was produced, the infamous stain on the blue dress, was the president ever in jeopardy, eventually having to confess his misdeeds. Similarly, Vitter can survive as long as Larry Flint, the Canal Street Madam, various prostitutes, and his, quote, political enemies, end quote, cannot produce solid evidence like video, audio recordings, phone records, pictures, etc. Without solid evidence and any more revelations, David Vitter will be able to survive this scandal and get back to work as a chastened, less effective, but still employed member of the United States Senate. It's interesting, however, that the role model for this conservative Republican is not a GOP icon like a Ronald Reagan, but the infamous Slick Willie, Bill Clinton. Politics make strange bedfellows indeed. Okay, folks, if you've got a question or comment you'd like to share with us here at Ringside, please email me at jeff@ringsidepolitics.com. That's it for tonight's show. I'm Jeff Cruair, and keep in mind, here at Ringside, we don't pull any punches.
Ringside Politics with a Punch is brought to you by the New Orleans Saints, dedicated to a better community. Pittman Broadcasting Services, giving you the best in everything from news, talk, smooth jazz, and gospel. BayouBuzz.com, for news, business, or fun, giving you the daily buzz around Louisiana. Since 1905, Joseph A. Bank has been crafting fine-tailored clothing of exceptional quality and guaranteed satisfaction. Joseph A. Bank has everything you're looking for in menswear, from suit separates to sportswear, accessories to formal wear. We're the place to dress you all year long. Joseph A. Bank, the expert in men's apparel.
Ride the world's largest inline water slide.
Blue Bayou, Baton Rouge, land of the giants.
Ride the world's largest racer slide.
Blue Bayou, land of the giants.
Ride the world's largest funnel slide.
Blue Bayou, Baton Rouge, land of the giants.
Ride the world's largest dark bowl slide.
Blue Bayou, land of the giants.
Ride the world's largest sled slide.
Blue Bayou, land of the giants.
The land of the giants is
Blue Bayou, Baton Rouge.
WLAE Channel 32 in New Orleans, your neighborhood PBS station.
Good evening, I'm Jim Lara. On the NewsHour tonight, the news of this Friday, Then an interview about a UN role in Iraq with U.S. Ambassador Zalmay Khalilzad. A search for economic clues in the stock market's flirtation with record highs this week. A media unit look at what the Harry Potter books are doing to kids' reading habits. And the weekly analysis of Mark Shields and David Brooks.
Major funding for the News Hour with Jim Lehrer is provided by...
The world's demand for energy will never stop, which is why a farmer is growing corn, and a farmer is growing soy, and why ADM is turning these crops into biofuels. The world's demand for energy will never stop, which is why ADM will never stop. We're only getting started. ADM, resourceful by nature.
Retirement isn't just about spending endless hours enjoying warm tropical waters. It's not even just about leaping and jumping for joy because you planned ahead smartly. And it's not even about sharing time with family and friends over a great meal whenever you want. Or is it? It's time to start thinking about tomorrow. Pacific Life, the power to help you succeed.
The new AT&T. And by Chevron. The Atlantic Philanthropies. And with the ongoing support of these institutions and foundations.